For planning for fall planting, choosing the right trees and shrubs for success. And again, I'm Amy Freidig, a statewide horticulture outreach specialist for the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension Horticulture Program. So it is August and we are almost to pumpkin spice lattes, gourds, Halloween, all the good stuff, but it's also time for fall tree planting. So today we're going to cover the following topics during our short time together. We're going to talk about why you'd want to plant trees in the fall, so the benefits of doing it relatively soon here, what species to plant, and just as importantly, what to maybe not plant in the fall and to wait until spring, what to do when you face the temptation of the clearance sale rack at the garden center, selecting the right tree species for you, and we'll end with a quick overview of the nursery stock options you have in the fall. So we'll have a fall mini webinar together. But we're going to start with centering ourselves on the all-important idea of when. So we're all thinking the same time frame when I say fall. So in the case of planting trees, fall planting timeframes generally mean from the start of or mid-September through early October. Now, that's a vast generalization because it does really depend on the soil temperature. You want the soil temperature to be consistently at 50 degrees Fahrenheit at about six inches deep. And you want to aim for your newly planted tree to have about 6 weeks of mild weather before freezing temperatures start so that your tree can work to grow its roots. So of course, going by the calendar is not feel safe. It's going to vary from year to year and place to place. So thinking of fall generally as a time when you're still going to have about those 6 weeks of non-freezing soil temperatures and milder weather. And generally speaking, planting in November is going to be a little too late for a fall planting. The risk of planting later into the fall is that the later you plant, the reduced amount of time it has to grow roots before the soil freezes. So why do you want to plant a tree in the fall? The simple answer is it's good for the roots, and it's all about the roots. Planting is a time of stress for the tree, and its priority is its root system. It works to grow and establish that root system first, and then the pretty above ground things that we humans like more branches and more leaves, kind of come second. So anything that we can do to reduce that stress while it's growing that newer root system is helpful for healthy establishment. So here's how that works. The cooler above ground temperatures generally means that the tree is going to lose less water than it would during summer heat. So there's less stress put on the plant caused by that hot summer weather. And meanwhile, it's also warm enough below ground. Roots will still be active underground until the soil is less than about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So while temperatures are around that 50-degree mark, soil temperatures are around that 50-degree mark, that we mentioned earlier, healthy root establishment can be taking place. And finally, there's more rain typically in the fall, and that's also supportive for your new tree and can help reduce stress because it's got plenty of accessible water. One other interesting piece of this too is that as the leaves on the new tree start to fall off as we go further into fall, the tree can divert its resources towards root establishment and growth instead of trying to support both the canopy of leaves and new root growth. So that's just another little benefit of putting a tree in the ground in the fall. Next up, what should you plant? So there are some species that are going to be better suited to a fall planting due to the nature of the root systems. The tree species that are going to do the best with a fall planting have shallower fibrous root systems, which are going to recover faster when planted and establish faster, and that'll all help it access water. Also, you're going to have more luck with deciduous tree species or trees that lose their leaves in the fall. Those are going to do better than, say, evergreens. And we'll talk about that in just a second as well. So here's some common examples of plants that you will find if you do some research that you'll find listed in extension resources as good fall planting choices: apple, catalpa, crab apples, elms, Hackberries and hawthorns, horse chestnuts or buckeyes, lindens, most maples with the exception of red maple, redbud sycamore, and some shrubs I've listed there include lilac, forsythia, and witch hazel. And here, let's talk about what you should probably avoid planting in fall. And those are going to be slower growing species or species with big, thick taproots, because those are going to have root systems that are slower to establish, which can be an issue because there's a limited amount of time before the dormant season is fully on. You should also probably wait on planting evergreens. Now, why shouldn't you plant evergreens in the fall? Well, remember that evergreens are evergreen, so they're going to keep being active during the winter, photosynthesizing to some extent, which photosynthesis is the process of plants using sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to make their food, albeit growing at a slower rate during the dormant season. So a fall planted evergreen is going to have a limited amount of time until that ground freezes to take up water through its establishing root system. And it needs some amount of water throughout that dormant season, throughout the winter, because water is going to be used or lost during the dormant season, and the tree is going to need to replace it. And what can happen is that because it's got this unestablished root system that can't take up as much water, it's going to increase the risk of winter burn or winter drying. And I have a picture of what this can look like up on the screen right now. So winter burn is a common problem for evergreen plants, and yes, it can obviously damage them and kill them. There are different causes of it, but for the case of a newly planted evergreen, one big cause is the issue of that underdeveloped root system, not being able to get enough water into the tree before the ground freezes. And then that evergreen continues transpiring, pulling water up through the leaves and losing it through its leaves or its needles. And in the winter, it's not replaced because the ground is frozen and the water is frozen, and the result is brown and dead foliage, not very attractive, like what you see in the picture here. And depending upon the above ground weather conditions at the time, like wind or warmer intermittent temperatures, the result can be made even worse. So it's a better idea to hold off and wait to plant your evergreens in the spring. But if you have your heart set on it and an evergreen is a must for you, you can still do it, but recommendations say to plant them earlier. So starting mid-August and not going past a mid-September planting date to give the root systems more time to develop before freezing and winter conditions strike, so that you can hopefully reduce the risk of winter injury. And while you should be watering any newly planted tree to support it, and later on I'll have Julie and Peggy share my favorite resource, not yet, for that in the chat, you really want to pay heed to the watering of evergreens, especially broadleafed evergreens with more leaf surface area that can lose even more water. So some common examples that you'll see in extension resources that you should hold off on include beech, birch, cherry trees, ginkgos, hawthorns, larches, which is a deciduous conifer, magnolia, oaks, poplars, plum, redbud. I know you'll say to me, but Amy, that was on the prior list of things to plant as well. And you will see it in different recommended as a fall planting and one to hold off on in fall as well. They have kind of hard to handle root systems. So you'll see it in both ways. It's kind of a, cost benefit analysis. You decide if you want to try that kind of species. Red maple, as mentioned earlier, this is just a slower establishing plant, so it's not recommended for fall planting. Hold off until spring. Sweet gum, tulip trees, willows, and those evergreens like fir, hemlock, and arborvitae, a whole bunch of them, some shrubs as well to hold off on: dogwood, rhododendron, and azalea, and those are some evergreens as well, broadleafed evergreens. Now, fall is also the time of year when the temptation of the clearance sale rack plant looms. So you might be wondering, are these plants good deals, or are they going to cause me a good deal of trouble once I bring them home? And the answer is, like with a lot of things, it depends. So garden centers and nurseries may put plants on sale for a couple of reasons. One may be that it is unhealthy. Another common one is that they might have too much of a particular plant and they don't want to overwinter it until next year. So they're looking to sell it quickly and get rid of it. Now, if you are looking at a clearly unhealthy plant, especially if it has visible signs or symptoms of insects or diseases, purchasing that and putting it in the ground is a risk. You may lose the plant itself, and you may also introduce pests into your landscape that you didn't have before. So you'll have to make that decision for yourself, but be aware that this really might not be a good plan. And if it's more of an overstock situation and you feel that that temptation to just impulse purchase something cool because it's there and it looks awesome and you've always wanted one. I'm sure we're all thinking the same thing, been there, done that. Be aware that you might not have the planting site environment that that particular species needs. You might be setting yourself up for a longer term maintenance nightmare if you put in a tree that you didn't plan for properly or research. Because remember, these are long-lived species that are going to get big, and it's always better to know what you're getting yourself into than to do first and ask questions later. So again, this is going to have to be a cost benefit analysis that you do. There isn't a universal answer, but I do think it's fair to say if you have that plant in your cart, maybe take the 10 minutes, walk around the garden center a little bit and have a good think to really think deeply about whether or not it's a good purchase for your situation. Which brings me to a really important concept for selecting any plant, and that's right plant, right place. And this is the concept of matching the environmental conditions of the planting site with the needs of the plant. And this is especially important with long-lived species like trees. If you put a tree into a spot that does not have what the tree needs environmentally, you're going to be setting it up to fail or setting yourself up for a maintenance headache. And you want to set it up for success from the start. And that means ideally you'll want to assess your planting site first and then find a species that matches what your planting site has. So what types of things should you know about your planting site? You should know the basics that the plant's going to need: light, water, soil, temperature. These are all important things to start with. So you want to know what light conditions your planting site has: full sun, full shade, partial shade, etc. You want to know more about the soil conditions, and that's actually connected very much to water. The best way to learn about your soil situation is to have a soil test performed. You can still do that now and into the fall. This will also give you an idea of the pH of your soil, which can also play a role in what species will succeed there and what nutrients are available to your tree. And you also may already have kind of a general idea of the kind of soil you have and how it deals with water. For example, do you know that your site is really sandy and does it drain well and quickly? Or is it on the clayey side and drains slowly? Or is this an area that floods a lot? That can really influence what species you pick. Zone. This is related to temperature. You also want to know what zone you're in. The US is divided into 13 hardiness zones. They're also referred to as growing zones or cold hardiness zones. And a hardiness zone is a geographical area that's defined by the average annual extreme minimum winter temperature. So Wisconsin's hardiness zones are 3, 4, 5, and 6, and all plants, shrubs, trees, they're classified according to that average minimum winter temperature that they can reliably survive. So you need to make sure that your tree species is hardy to your site's zone. I also put this last one in with the environmental aspects of the site because it really, of course, may change what species you choose to plant. Year after year, are there pests that you're dealing with, like insects or diseases that you know are going to be there? It's good to consider this early on because sometimes certain pests only affect certain species of tree, and you may wish to totally avoid that situation by selecting a tree species that is not affected. There are also a lot of other considerations you need to make before you plant a tree. I'm going to leave this list up here and talk about it briefly, but if Peggy or Julie could put into the chat the link to an extension publication we have that's going to walk you through some of these considerations as well as the environmental ones we talked about before. The publication is called Choosing the Right Landscape Plants Factors to Consider. So some of the things that'll be discussed in there that I just want to highlight here that you should know about your planting site are looking up and looking down. So what's above and below ground? Are there power lines that you should be avoiding? Are there underground structures or lines? You'll need to contact something like Digger's Hotline to ascertain what is underground, because that may preclude you from planting in that site in general. Function. What do you want the plant's role in the landscape to be? Is it going to be a shade tree, a screening tree? Do you want it to be a pollinator or a wildlife resource? So there are lots of different things that a tree can do in your landscape. Mature size. Be sure that your planting site can accommodate the eventual size of your tree when it's full grown. I know it's hard to think 20 years into the future. Both height and don't forget width. I always forget they get wider too. And in relation to mature size, is that mature size going to work with any structures that are nearby? And of course, the fourth one up here, that's the fun one, ornamental considerations, how it looks, what is its form, its flowers, etc. That's another fun and important thing to consider when you're picking a tree species. So to start to wrap things up here, let's talk about the type of nursery stock that you'll want to consider for a fall planting. And there really are only two of them. But I'm going to introduce three kinds of nursery stock right here. These are the three kinds that are available for trees. And a reminder, nursery stock is just a fancy way of saying how your tree is going to come to you before you plant it. So the options that you can generally get for trees are balled and burlapped or B&B, container grown, and bare root. So balled and burlap trees, these are going to be available for fall planting. So this is an option. These trees are going to tend to be a little bit bigger. They're dug at the nursery and they have their remaining root system after they're dug enclosed in a burlap and wire cage for transporting. These are going to be really heavy trees. They may require professional delivery or planting services. Container grown trees. These are also available for fall plantings. These trees are grown in a container, as the name states, and their entire root system is coming along to be planted because it's right there in the container. These tend to be a little smaller and easier to move than a balled and burlap tree. This kind of nursery stock is not going to be available for a fall planting, the bare root nursery stock. So bare root trees are dug in the fall. They're kept in cold storage and then they're sold and planted in early spring while they're still dormant. And as the name says, bare root, they're bare. There's no soil on the roots. These have a very limited planting window, but they are great trees to plant. They're my favorite kind of tree to plant because you can see the root system so well, so you can set it up really nicely. And if you're interested in this kind of nursery stock, you'll want to plan for that planting next early spring. So fall is a great time to do that planning and assess your planting site if you're interested in planting a bare root tree. So again, this fall, you're going to want to go with a balled and burlapped or a container grown tree for your fall planting. Plan for that bare root one in the fall and plant in the early spring. Recommendations will also tell you to pick out a moderately sized specimen of your nursery stock of these two types of nursery stock. Save the larger caliper or the really big planting stock for spring plantings. And once you have your tree picked out, you're going to want to plant it properly. We're not going to go into the specifics of tree planting in this talk. I believe there's one that's happening on tree planting specifically in next week or in a couple weeks. But know that each kind of nursery stock has some planting specifics that will help set your tree up for success from the start. Generally speaking, though, some of the most important things you're going to want to do to set your tree up to succeed include digging a properly sized hole that's not too deep, because one of the most important things to avoid is planting your tree too deeply. And You also want to water it properly to help support it. And now if Peggy or Julie could put my favorite watering resource in the chat right now, there's this nice guide from the University of Minnesota. It's a great reminder of how much and how frequently you'll need to water your newly planted tree. And it may surprise you how much it is. So now we're just going to wrap up. In summary, fall is a great time to consider planting your trees, and you're going to want to start planning for that now and thinking about putting it in the ground generally from September to mid-October. Some species will do better than others, those with fibrous, shallower root systems where the root system can establish more quickly. Are desirable. So consider whether the species you're thinking about is a good fall planting option from that aspect. And finally, right plant, right place concepts. So know your planting sites, pick your species based on the conditions that your site can provide. And that'll mean doing some research and trying hard to avoid the impulse purchasing at the garden center, even if something awesome is on the clearance rack. And you'll want to choose between a balled and burlapped or container grown trees for fall planting. So thank you all. I think we have a few minutes for questions. I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Yes, we do have some questions, and thank you so much, Amy, for that presentation. And let's get to a couple of questions. I really like this one. This person writes in that they had a red maple planted by a tree service a couple of years ago, October of 2021. And she says it was planted in late October. If it does not have as much time to grow roots in that year, can it grow more roots in the next year? It seems to be doing well, she says.
That's a great question. And I think that kind of gets to horticulture is a science and an art. And so sometimes, you know, we were talking kind of the cost benefit analysis, say, of planting an evergreen and maybe, you know, or any of the slower to root species and holding off until spring. That's a guide, and that's saying, it's not saying, no, you can't do this. It's saying this is the situation, this is the result. Perhaps you, with your maple planting in October, maybe that year the conditions were conducive so that there were milder temperatures. There was enough time for that root system to be able to develop enough to make it through until the following year. And perhaps you supported it properly with water so that it had what it needed to stay alive and to thrive over time. Yes, root systems will continue to develop in the future after you plant it. Trees take a couple of years to kind of get that established, depending on how big it is at time of planting. But I am glad to hear, great. I'm glad something worked out. We like to hear when plants are doing well, and not when we're bummed out when things, especially trees, die on you, because they can be really important parts of your landscape.
All right, thanks, Amy. As you mentioned, we do have a mini webinar, an online program coming up next week that will specifically cover some do's and don'ts of tree planting. However, this question is too important not to cover here as well. And the question is, when planting a balled and burlapped tree, should the wire cage be removed or left on the soil/root ball? And maybe you could expand that to not just wire cages, but burlap and all kinds of things that we have on our plant roots.
That's a really important question. And I know people have heard conflicting things or may even see conflicting things going on in practice when they see trees planted. Yes, I will say yes, absolutely. Please remove the wire cage and the burlap, as well as sometimes there's twine, any materials like that that are wrapped around the tree, even including like a plant tag. Okay, we want to avoid having those materials around and constricting the root system. Extension, UW Madison UW-Madison Division of Extension, what's our title? We definitely recommend that you remove it all. And you can do so when you get it into the planting hole and you adjust it. You can then clip off the wire basket and clip off the burlap and kind of peel it away and totally remove it from the hole. What it does is it restricts root growth. And as you've seen from the presentation, root growth is so vital to the long-term success of your tree. And when you constrict roots or plant too deeply, you're increasing the risk for your tree to be subjected to certain problems like girdling roots, which is where a circularizing root grows around the trunk of the tree. And as the tree trunk gets bigger and the root gets bigger, so they'll kind of bump into each other and the root will exert pressure on the tree trunk, which contains the plumbing of the tree, the vascular tissue where the water and the food flow. So what happens then is essentially you're kind of choking off that tree. And, it doesn't happen right away, but all of a sudden this tree that you loved and was beautiful, all of a sudden it may be dying and there's not a lot you can do about a girdling root situation. It can kill your tree. So anyway, to sum it up, yes, if you could learn one thing today, take off the wire cage and burlap to help avoid some long-term problems.
Amy and everyone, we have just 1 minute left, but there was a question about how do you factor in deer to the equation? And so I am putting one of my favorite resource links in the chat right now. It is from Rutgers in New Jersey, Rutgers University, but it's a landscape plants rated by deer resistance. And so you can type in any plant and see how their research rated that particular plant. Maybe not all the plants are the same in New Jersey as here, but it's an excellent website and resource. So I'll start you off with that, and we do just have a few minutes. Maybe you could say about if you have a plant that you really want to put in, what might you say about the deer piece of it?
Great question. I immediately think, oh, should I joke about is there a budget for a 6-foot tall electric fence in there along with the purchase of the tree? Deer can be difficult, especially with young trees. I would research it, like Peggy said, find out what you can about the species of the tree, the desirability. You can erect a tall enough fence that they cannot, so put chicken wire all around it. That's a laborious thing, but you can do that to keep them out, because fencing is, aside from picking something that is less likely to be consumed, fencing is probably your best bet to keep them away.
Very good, Amy. We do have to wrap it up there. I just put another link that is connected to that fencing or protecting your plants from deer as well. So another link in the chat box. We also have been putting in the chat box a link to an evaluation survey. So we really hope that folks will take a moment to tell us what you thought of our program today. As the webinar closes, you will also be redirected to the survey. So find the link in the chat box or wait until you get redirected to the survey, and we'd appreciate your feedback on today's program. I'd like to offer again our thanks to Amy for that excellent presentation. We hope you gained some insights into what plants you might add to your landscape this fall and some things to avoid. There was a comment in the chat that folks would like that slide that you had that had the list. So let's make those, that list that you provided, let's make that available when we make the recording available. How about that?
That sounds great.
So again, thank you everyone for joining us. You can find a list of all of our upcoming events on the Extension Horticulture website. That's hort.extension.wisc.edu. And thank you all for joining us. We hope you'll join us again real soon. Have a great day, everyone, and see you next time.